Have you ever wondered why some of the most intelligent people often feel misunderstood, overthink everything, and seem different from everyone around them? Psychology has discovered that extremely high IQ isn't just about being smarter. It changes the way a person experiences reality itself. Watch this video until the end, because one of these 11 psychological traits may explain something about yourself that you've struggled to understand your entire life. You know what's interesting about people with extremely high IQs? They rarely look the way we expect them to. Most people picture someone with a very high IQ as obviously impressive, constantly confident, solving problems out loud, making sure the room is aware of their intelligence. But psychology research consistently tells a very different story. Many of the behavioral patterns most commonly found in people with extremely high IQs don't look like intelligence at all, and some of them actually look like the opposite. What cognitive psychologists have found after decades of studying highly intelligent individuals is that a very high IQ doesn't just make a person smarter, it changes the entire way a person processes the world, and that difference shows up in very specific, very recognizable ways. Here are 11 psychological traits that research consistently finds in people with extremely high IQs. Sign 1. They spend a lot of time alone. The first trait is a strong preference for solitude. Highly intelligent people often spend significant amounts of time alone, not because they dislike other people, but because their brains are constantly processing. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for complex reasoning, planning, and deep reflection, tends to function most effectively in quiet environments without external distraction. For a high IQ brain, solitude isn't loneliness, it's fuel. Research published by the London School of Economics found something that seems counterintuitive at first. Highly intelligent individuals reported significantly lower life satisfaction from frequent social interaction compared to people with average IQs. Their brains, in other words, don't always recharge the way most people's do. They recharge from stillness. This doesn't mean high IQ people are antisocial or difficult to be around. It means their cognitive systems work at a depth that requires quiet time to function at full capacity. Social interaction is engaging, but it's also cognitively expensive for a brain that's always analyzing every layer of what's happening in a room. Sign 2. Their minds never fully switch off. The second trait is a mind that never truly quiets down. People with very high IQs frequently report that their thinking doesn't stop. Not during rest, not late at night, not during activities that most people find relaxing. There's always a background process running, turning over a problem, revisiting a conversation, building a theory, running mental simulations for things that haven't happened yet. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski studied this extensively in gifted individuals and described it through his theory of overexcitabilities. He found that highly intelligent people experience what he called psychomotor overexcitability, a restless internal energy that expresses itself mentally rather than physically, a drive to think that doesn't have a natural off switch. Neuroscientist Rex Young's research at the University of New Mexico found that higher intelligence is associated with richer connectivity between distant regions of the brain, not just faster processing in isolated areas. The highly intelligent brain doesn't just think more quickly, it makes connections across a much larger network of ideas simultaneously, all the time. That constant connectivity is what makes rest difficult. The brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. Sign 3. They feel things more deeply than they show. The third trait is one that surprises people the most when they encounter it in the research. There's a widespread assumption that high intelligence comes with emotional detachment, the cold, rational thinker who lives entirely in the mind. But psychology research directly contradicts this picture. People with significantly elevated IQs actually tend to feel things with greater intensity than average, not less. Dabrowski identified this as emotional overexcitability, a heightened responsiveness to emotional stimuli that makes high IQ individuals acutely sensitive to beauty, music, injustice, and the suffering of others. A study published in the journal Intelligence found that higher measured IQ correlated with significantly greater emotional reactivity and emotional depth, particularly in response to art, moral questions, and human behavior. The reason this trait is so often invisible is that highly intelligent people also tend to be very good at regs longer than necessary. Sign 4. They're comfortable saying, "I don't know." The fourth trait is intellectual humility. This one surprises people because we tend to assume high intelligence produces high confidence, but psychology research consistently shows the opposite pattern. People with very high IQs are far more likely to acknowledge the limits of their knowledge than people with average IQs, and they do it genuinely, not as a social performance. This connects directly to the Dunning-Kruger effect, the well-documented finding that lower confidence often produces overconfidence because the person doesn't know enough to see the complexity that exists in a domain. Highly intelligent people, by contrast, understand that complexity intimately. They've thought deeply enough and encountered enough exceptions to see how much remains genuinely uncertain. So when a high IQ person says, "I don't know," it's not hesitation, it's precision, and it's one of the most reliable markers of genuine intelligence that psychology has identified. The person who holds every opinion with absolute certainty, regardless of evidence, is almost never the most intelligent person in room. Sign 5. They struggle to find people who think at their level. The fifth trait is one that highly intelligent people rarely talk about openly, but that research shows is nearly universal among them. They find it genuinely difficult to find people they can fully connect with intellectually, not because they believe they're superior to others, but because conversations that don't go deep enough, or people who aren't interested in the same kinds of questions, leave them feeling a very specific kind of unstimulated. Psychologist Leta Hollingworth, who spent decades studying highly gifted adults, identified what she called the problem of stimulus poverty, the experience of a mind that can't find sufficient challenge or depth in its immediate environment. What she observed wasn't arrogance, it was a quiet longing for real conversation, for someone who could follow them all the way to the bottom of an idea without needing to turn back. The result is that highly intelligent people sometimes appear aloof or distant, not because they lack social ability, but because they've learned from experience that most conversations aren't built to hold the depth they require. So, they hold back. They calibrate themselves down, and a lot of who they actually are never enters the room at all. Sign 6. They change their minds when the evidence changes. The sixth trait is cognitive flexibility. Highly intelligent people tend to treat beliefs as working theories rather than fixed identities. When new information appears, information that directly contradicts what they previously believed, their brain updates the model. They don't experience changing their mind as a threat to who they are. They experience it as accuracy. In psychology, this is called cognitive flexibility, and it's one of the most consistent markers of advanced problem-solving ability. The brain of a highly intelligent person isn't attached to being right about any specific thing. It's interested in having the most accurate possible picture of reality, even when that means discarding something it previously held with confidence. From the outside, this can look like inconsistency. A person who shifts positions can appear unreliable, but what's actually happening is the opposite of uncertainty. It's a mind running a continuous, honest update process. The people who never change their minds, regardless of new evidence, are almost never the most intelligent people in the room. Sign 7. They observe far more than they say. The seventh trait is a preference for observation over expression. In conversations and group settings, highly intelligent people often default to watching before speaking. They listen to what isn't being said as much as to what is. They pick up on the patterns in social dynamics, who defers to whom, where the real tension is, what the conversation is actually about beneath the surface level, before they contribute anything. Research on social intelligence and general cognitive ability consistently shows that higher IQ correlates with greater accuracy in reading social cues and emotional signals. But it also means high IQ individuals often need more time to process what they're observing before they respond. They're not slower thinkers, they're gathering more data first. This creates a frustrating and common misread. The quiet observing person is frequently assumed to have the least to contribute. In reality, they're often the one with the most complete picture of what's actually happening. Sign 8. They procrastinate hardest on the work that matters most. The 8th trait is one that highly intelligent people often find deeply confusing about themselves. The projects with the most personal meaning, the work with the greatest potential, are frequently the hardest to begin. Smaller, lower-stakes tasks get done with ease. The work that could genuinely represent their full capabilities seems to live permanently at the edge of starting. Researchers studying high cognitive ability individuals found that this pattern isn't laziness. It's a form of what they called complexity awareness. Before beginning a significant piece of work, a high IQ brain comprehends the full scope of what excellent would require. Every flaw the finished product might contain, every way it could fall short of the standard the mind can already clearly see. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research identified this as particularly common in gifted individuals. A fear not of failure exactly, but of the gap between internal vision and external output. The procrastination isn't an absence of care, it's the presence of too much of it. The work that never starts is almost always the work that matters the most. Sign 9. They get bored faster than almost anyone around them. The 9th trait is a low tolerance for repetition and a constant need for novelty. Highly intelligent people tend to habituate quickly, meaning they need more novel input to maintain the same level of engagement that most people get from familiar routines. Not just in obvious situations like slow meetings or repetitive tasks. At a neurological level, the stimulus that satisfied yesterday doesn't satisfy at the same level today. Neuroscientific research has linked higher cognitive ability to higher baseline dopamine activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's reward system for new information and intellectual challenge. When that challenge disappears, the signal drops sharply. The restlessness isn't a mood, it's a physiological response to insufficient stimulation. This is why highly intelligent people often pursue multiple interests simultaneously, change careers more than once, or find themselves strangely dissatisfied in situations that seem from the outside perfectly comfortable. The brain isn't being ungrateful, it's running a search for what it was built to find. Sign 10. They question themselves more than anyone would expect. The 10th trait is persistent self-doubt, and this one is directly connected to intelligence, not opposed to it. People with very high IQs often experience a degree of internal uncertainty that the people around them would find it hard to believe, not performative humility. Genuine recurring doubt about whether their thinking is as reliable as others seem to assume, not because they're fragile, because they understand complexity too well to feel entirely certain about anything. This connects again to the Dunning-Kruger effect, but at the high end. The deeper your understanding of a subject, the more clearly you can see how much remains uncertain. The more you know, the more accurately you can see everything you don't know. Intelligence doesn't produce certainty. It produces a more precise map of how much territory remains unexplored. Psychologist Albert Ellis observed that highly intelligent individuals were frequently the most prone to holding their own output to a standard not applied to anyone else, and treating any gap between performance and potential as evidence of fundamental inadequacy. The doubt isn't a sign of lesser intelligence. It's often the most reliable signature of a greater one. Sign 11, they carry a quiet sense of not quite belonging. And the 11th trait is the one that ties all the others together. Highly intelligent people frequently report a quiet but persistent sense of not quite fitting in their social groups, their professions, sometimes in the world at large. Not a dramatic alienation, a subtle, ongoing awareness of being slightly out of sync with the immediate environment around them. This isn't a personality disorder or a social deficiency. It's the predictable result of experiencing the world at a different level of resolution than most of the people around you. When your brain processes more, connects more, feels more intensely, and requires more depth than the environment consistently offers, a mild sense of displacement is almost inevitable. Not because something went wrong, but because something works differently. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, whose decades of research on creativity and exceptional minds remain among the most important in cognitive psychology, found that individuals with the greatest intellectual capacity almost universally described their inner lives as the most complex, the most difficult to explain, and the hardest to share. Not because they were uniquely suffering, but because they were experiencing life at a level of detail that most people around them weren't. And living at that resolution changes what you notice, what you need, and what ordinary life is capable of giving you. What's interesting about all 12 of these traits is how consistently they're misread. The person who needs solitude looks antisocial. The one whose mind never stops looks anxious. The one who feels deeply looks unexpectedly sensitive. The one who doubts themselves looks uncertain. The one who doesn't quite fit anywhere looks like they're difficult. But sometimes what looks like a collection of quiet difficulties is actually something very specific. A mind that was built to process more, connect more, and go further than most of the environments it moves through every day. At its core, a very high IQ isn't just about knowing more or thinking faster. It's about experiencing the full complexity of the world with very little filter between you and it. And that, more than any test or number, is what makes it both the most powerful and the most demanding thing a person can carry. If this video described you today, leave a comment with the trait that felt most accurate. I read every single one. And if it gave language to something you've been carrying quietly for a long time, share it with someone who might need to hear it. I'm Turnwiser. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you next time. What makes this trait even more complicated is that most people never see it happening. From the outside, the highly intelligent person may appear calm, composed, and completely in control. Internally, however, an entirely different process is unfolding. Every decision is being examined from multiple angles. Every assumption is being tested. Every conclusion is being challenged before it is allowed to settle. While most people are looking for answers, the highly intelligent mind is often looking for better questions, and that distinction matters more than most people realize. Average thinking seeks closure. Exceptional thinking seeks accuracy. A person with an extremely high IQ is often less interested in protecting their ego than protecting their understanding of reality. That is why they can spend hours investigating a question that most people would dismiss in minutes. They are not trying to appear intelligent. They are trying to reduce uncertainty. This tendency creates another psychological pattern that researchers frequently observe. Highly intelligent people often become fascinated by subjects that appear completely unrelated to their lives. A person working in finance may become obsessed with astronomy. A software engineer may spend years studying philosophy. A physician may develop a deep interest in evolutionary psychology. To outsiders, these interests can seem random, but to the highly intelligent brain, knowledge is rarely separated into neat categories. Everything connects. The more information a person gathers from different domains, the more opportunities the brain has to discover hidden relationships between ideas. This process is known as integrative thinking. It is the ability to combine concepts from multiple disciplines into a single coherent understanding. Many of the greatest breakthroughs in human history emerged from this exact process. Innovation often happens when knowledge from one field collides with knowledge from another, and highly intelligent minds seem naturally drawn toward these collisions. They are not collecting facts, they are building networks. Every book becomes connected to another book. Every idea becomes connected to another idea. Over time, this creates a mental architecture that allows them to see patterns invisible to most people. This is one reason why highly intelligent individuals often arrive at conclusions that seem obvious only after they explain them. The conclusion feels simple, but the pathway that produced it was extraordinarily complex. Another trait frequently observed in people with extremely high IQs is their unusual relationship with uncertainty. Most people experience uncertainty as discomfort. The unknown creates anxiety. It creates a desire for immediate answers. But highly intelligent individuals often tolerate ambiguity far better than average. They can sit with unanswered questions. They can remain suspended between multiple possibilities without rushing toward a conclusion. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a high tolerance for cognitive ambiguity, the ability to function effectively without complete information. This matters because reality itself is ambiguous. Human behavior is ambiguous. Relationships are ambiguous. Life is ambiguous. The person who demands certainty at every step will often misunderstand reality because reality rarely provides certainty. The highly intelligent mind recognizes this. Instead of forcing reality into simple categories, it allows complexity to exist. It can hold competing possibilities simultaneously. It can acknowledge that two seemingly contradictory things may both contain truth. This ability becomes particularly visible when discussing social issues, politics, morality, or human behavior. While many people seek absolute answers, highly intelligent individuals often recognize layers that others overlook, not because they lack convictions, but because they understand how complicated human reality actually is. And the deeper someone understands complexity, the harder it becomes to reduce everything into simple slogans. This often creates another challenge. Highly intelligent people are frequently misunderstood during disagreements. When they explore multiple perspectives, others may assume they lack conviction. When they acknowledge uncertainty, others may mistake it for weakness. When they refuse simplistic answers, others may interpret it as indecision. But in many cases, the opposite is true. Their caution comes from seeing more variables. Their hesitation comes from recognizing more complexity. Their uncertainty comes from intellectual honesty. And intellectual honesty is often much harder than confidence. Because confidence feels good, uncertainty does not. Yet the most intelligent minds repeatedly choose accuracy over comfort. Another fascinating psychological pattern appears in how highly intelligent individuals relate to success. Many people assume that intelligence automatically creates confidence. Research suggests something more complicated. Extremely intelligent individuals often raise their standards faster than they raise their achievements. Every accomplishment immediately reveals a higher level that remains unreached. Every success exposes a new frontier. As a result, satisfaction can become surprisingly elusive. What looks impressive to everyone else may feel incomplete to them, not because they are ungrateful, because their minds automatically identify the next level of improvement. The finish line keeps moving, and sometimes they become so focused on what remains undone that they fail to appreciate how far they have already come. This is one reason why many highly intelligent individuals appear less impressed by their own accomplishments than everyone around them. Their attention naturally gravitates toward the gap rather than the achievement, toward the problem rather than the praise, toward the next challenge rather than the current victory. And while this mindset can produce extraordinary results, it can also become exhausting if left unchecked, because a mind that constantly seeks improvement must eventually learn how to recognize completion. Otherwise, even success can begin to feel like failure in disguise. And perhaps that is one of the deepest psychological realities of extremely high IQ. The same cognitive abilities that create extraordinary strengths can also create extraordinary challenges. The ability to see complexity can create overthinking. The ability to recognize possibilities can create indecision. The ability to feel deeply can create emotional overwhelm. The ability to understand people can create loneliness. The ability to see further can make it difficult to enjoy the present moment. Intelligence is not simply a gift, it is a responsibility, a powerful tool that requires careful management, because the mind that sees more also carries more, and understanding how that mind works may be one of the most important things a highly intelligent person can ever learn about themselves. Another trait that rarely gets discussed is how often highly intelligent people feel disconnected from environments that reward speed over depth. Modern life moves quickly. Social media rewards immediate reactions. Conversations reward quick responses. Workplaces often reward visible activity more than careful thinking. But the highly intelligent mind frequently operates in the opposite direction. It wants to slow down. It wants to examine. It wants to understand before it responds. This can create a strange tension between the individual and the world around them. While everyone else seems comfortable making decisions with limited information, they continue gathering data. While others have already chosen a side, they are still examining the evidence. While others are focused on appearing certain, they remain focused on being accurate. The result is that highly intelligent people are often underestimated early in interactions. People mistake thoughtfulness for hesitation, reflection for insecurity, silence for lack of confidence. Yet as time passes, something interesting tends to happen. The quality of their thinking becomes visible. The conclusions they reach slowly begin proving themselves. The patterns they noticed start unfolding in reality, and the people who initially seemed the least certain often turn out to have understood the situation most clearly. This relates to another fascinating characteristic. People with extremely high IQs frequently trust long-term outcomes more than short-term appearances. Most people are influenced heavily by immediate results. If something works today, they assume it is a good idea. If something fails today, they assume it is a bad idea. Highly intelligent individuals tend to think differently. They ask a different question. What happens if this continues? What does this decision produce over 5 years instead of 5 days? What are the second-order consequences? The third-order consequences? This future-oriented thinking allows them to identify problems before they become obvious. It allows them to notice trends while others are still focused on isolated events. And because of this, they often appear unusually patient, not because they enjoy waiting, because they understand that some outcomes require time. The most valuable skills require time. The strongest relationships require time. The deepest knowledge requires time. The greatest achievements often require far more time than most people are willing to invest. And highly intelligent individuals are often unusually comfortable making investments that may not produce visible rewards for years. Another psychological pattern appears in the way they handle information. Most people consume information. Highly intelligent people often interrogate it. They do not automatically accept what they hear. They do not automatically reject it either. Instead, they examine it. Where did this claim come from? What evidence supports it? What assumptions is it based on? What incentives might influence the source? This habit sometimes makes them seem skeptical. But skepticism and cynicism are not the same thing. A cynic assumes everything is false. A skeptic investigates before deciding. Highly intelligent people tend to fall into the second category. They are not trying to be difficult. They are trying to understand reality as accurately as possible. And this tendency often protects them from manipulation, because manipulation depends on emotional reactions happening faster than critical thinking. The more a person questions information, the harder they become to deceive. Yet this same habit can also create challenges, because once you begin questioning everything, certainty becomes increasingly rare. The world becomes more complex, more nuanced, less black and white. And that complexity can feel isolating when most people prefer simpler explanations. This is one reason highly intelligent individuals often keep many of their thoughts to themselves, not because they have nothing to say, because explaining a complex idea sometimes requires more patience than the environment allows. They learn that not every thought needs to be shared, not every observation needs to be spoken, not every insight needs an audience, and over time they become selective. Careful about where they invest their intellectual energy. Careful about who they open up to, careful about which conversations are worth having. This selectivity is often misunderstood as arrogance, but in many cases it is actually conservation. Mental energy is limited, attention is limited, time is limited, and highly intelligent people are often acutely aware of these limits. They know that every commitment comes with a cost, every conversation consumes cognitive resources, every responsibility occupies mental space, so they become protective of their attention. Because attention is one of the most valuable resources they possess. Perhaps this is why many highly intelligent people eventually become less interested in impressing others and more interested in understanding themselves. When they are younger, they may seek recognition like everyone else. But as they mature, something changes. They begin realizing that external validation is temporary. The applause fades, the praise disappears, the approval of others constantly shifts. But self-understanding remains. The more clearly they understand their own mind, the more effectively they can navigate the world. And so their focus gradually turns inward, not in a selfish way, in a reflective way. They begin studying their own habits, their own fears, their own motivations, their own blind spots, because they understand a profound psychological truth. The hardest thing for any human being to understand is not the world, it is themselves. And the people with the highest intelligence often spend years, sometimes decades, pursuing that understanding, not because they have solved every mystery, because they have realized that the greatest mystery they will ever encounter is the mind they live with every day. And that journey of understanding never truly ends. Every year reveals something new. Every experience adds another layer. Every challenge exposes another hidden part of who they are, which is why many highly intelligent people remain curious for their entire lives. Not only about science, not only about psychology, not only about philosophy, but about themselves. Because the deeper they look, the more they discover that intelligence is not simply about knowing more. It is about remaining curious enough to keep learning, even when everyone else believes they already have the answers. So, what does all of this tell us? If you recognized yourself in several of these traits, it doesn't necessarily mean you have an extremely high IQ. But psychology suggests that people with exceptional intelligence often experience the world in ways that are far more complex than most people realize. They think deeper, question longer, notice more, and carry mental processes that are almost invisible from the outside. What looks like overthinking may actually be analysis. What looks like solitude may actually be reflection. What looks like uncertainty may actually be intellectual honesty. And what looks like not fitting in may simply be the result of seeing the world at a different level of resolution. The truth is, intelligence is often misunderstood because people tend to measure it by what they can observe. Fast answers, impressive credentials, confident opinions. But some of the strongest signs of intelligence happen quietly. They happen in private moments when nobody is watching. In the questions a person asks themselves, in the assumptions they challenge, in the ideas they continue exploring long after everyone else has lost interest. And perhaps that is why life can sometimes feel heavier for highly intelligent people. The same mind that allows them to see possibilities also allows them to see risks. The same sensitivity that helps them understand others makes them vulnerable to emotional overload. The same curiosity that drives learning makes simple answers feel unsatisfying. Their greatest strengths often come attached to their greatest struggles. But psychology shows us something important. These traits are not flaws. They are the natural consequences of a mind designed to process more information, make more connections, and search more deeply for truth and meaning. The goal is not to become less thoughtful, less curious, or less aware. The goal is to learn how to carry those abilities wisely, to think deeply without becoming trapped in overthinking, to seek knowledge without losing peace, to understand complexity without becoming overwhelmed by it, and most importantly, to recognize that intelligence is not measured by how much you know. It is measured by your willingness to keep learning, because the smartest people are rarely the ones who believe they have all the answers. They are the ones who remain curious enough to keep asking better questions, and in the end, that may be the most powerful psychological trait of all. Not a higher IQ, not a faster mind, but a lifelong commitment to understanding reality, understanding others, and understanding yourself. Because true intelligence is not about reaching the end of learning. It is about never losing the desire to continue the journey.